3 races, that's all it took for Formula One to break its own future. Not 10. Not half a season. 3. And what happened inside those 3 races forced the FIA into an emergency decision that almost never happens. They changed the rules immediately. Before Miami. Because cars were losing up to 50 kilometers per hour on full throttle. No braking. No warning. Just sudden, dangerous deceleration. At nearly 300 kilometers per hour. And it already led to a high-speed crash that could have been much worse. But here's the part no one is talking about. The system causing this wasn't failing. It was working exactly as designed. Which means Formula One didn't just have a problem. It created one. And when top drivers started pushing back, when pressure from inside the paddock exploded, when the risk became impossible to ignore, the FIA made one of the fastest regulatory changes in modern F1 history. 6 major changes. 1 emergency plan. And a single race? Miami, that will decide if this sport just saved itself or made things even worse. At first, it didn't look like a disaster. It looked like progress. Australia delivered something Formula One had been chasing for years. Constant action. Non-stop overtakes. Cars fighting everywhere. Over 100 moves in a single race. On paper, that's exactly what the sport wants. More battles. More excitement. More unpredictability. But inside the cars, drivers felt something completely different. Because those overtakes didn't feel earned. They didn't come from pressure. They didn't come from precision. They came from something artificial. A sudden drop in speed from the car ahead. Not a mistake. Not a lockup. Not a bad exit. Something else. And once drivers noticed it, they couldn't ignore it. Because it kept happening. Same situation. Same effect. A car ahead just loses speed. Massively. And the car behind doesn't have to fight. It just passes. Effortlessly. And that changes everything. Because Formula One is built on control. On knowing exactly what your car will do, at every moment. Brake here. Turn here. Accelerate here. No surprises. But now, there were surprises. Unpredictable ones. Moments where drivers had to react, instead of anticipate. And that's where confidence starts to crack. Because if you don't trust the car ahead, if you don't trust your own system, then every straight becomes a question mark. Every overtake feels different. And every decision carries more risk. But here's the part that made teams uncomfortable. Nothing was broken. No failures. No glitches. This behavior was intentional. Built into the new regulations. Which means the system wasn't malfunctioning. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. And that realization changed the tone completely. Because now the question isn't how to fix a problem. It's why the system behaves this way at all. Why it creates these sudden speed differences. Why it turns racing into something that feels unnatural. And more importantly, why drivers are starting to lose trust in it. But even with all those concerns, the sport didn't react immediately. Because the numbers still looked good. High overtakes. Close racing. Strong engagement. Everything that looks perfect from the outside. And that created a dangerous illusion. Because while the show looked better, the foundation underneath it was already starting to crack. And what almost no one realized at that moment is that Australia wasn't the success story. It was the first warning. A warning that would become impossible to ignore. Just 1 race later, China was supposed to calm everything down. Different track. Different layout. A chance to prove that Australia was just a one-off. But the exact opposite happened. Because the same behavior came back. And this time, it was impossible to ignore. Cars were still losing speed on straights. Not gradually. Not predictably. Suddenly. And drivers started noticing something even more concerning. It wasn't random. It was happening in specific phases of the lap. Same type of corners. Same type of exits. Same type of straights. And once you see a pattern, it stops being coincidence. It becomes a system. That's when engineers started digging deeper. Telemetry. Energy graphs. Deployment curves. Everything. Trying to understand what the car was actually doing beneath the surface. And what they found changed the entire conversation. Because the driver wasn't fully controlling performance anymore. The energy system was. Managing when power comes in. Managing when power disappears. Deciding, moment by moment, how fast the car can actually go. And that creates a completely different kind of racing. Not driver versus driver, but driver versus system. And here's where things get serious. Because Formula One has always been about precision. About eliminating uncertainty. About knowing exactly what happens when you press the throttle. But now, drivers were entering straights without certainty. Not knowing if the car ahead would suddenly slow down. Not knowing if their own car would behave the same way one lap later. And that lack of predictability starts to change behavior. Drivers lift earlier, brake differently, hold back just a little. And at this level, that little changes everything. But here's the twist no one expected. Not every team was suffering. Some teams were benefiting. Because if you understand the system better, if you manage energy more efficiently, you gain an advantage no one else has. And that creates tension. Because now, fixing the problem means removing someone's advantage. And in Formula One, that's where resistance begins. So while some teams were pushing for immediate changes, others were staying quiet, observing, adapting, maximizing what they had. And that split the paddock in two. One side thinking about safety, the other thinking about performance. And right in the middle, the FIA, watching everything, knowing something wasn't right, but also knowing that changing the rules too early could completely reshape the championship. So they waited, they analyzed, they held meetings, they looked at data, trying to understand if this was manageable, or if it was something deeper, something structural. And that's when the calendar delivered the worst possible scenario. The next race wasn't forgiving. It wasn't slow. It wasn't simple. It was one of the fastest circuits in the world. A place where any unpredictability is amplified. Suzuka. And what happened there didn't just confirm the problem. It forced Formula One to confront it immediately. Suzuka doesn't forgive uncertainty. It exposes it. Every corner demands commitment. Every straight builds speed without hesitation. And when drivers go through a place like this, they don't guess. They trust. They trust the car. They trust the system. They trust that nothing unexpected will happen at the worst possible moment. But this time, that trust was already fragile. Because Australia raised questions. China confirmed patterns. And Suzuka removed any doubt. The same issue was still there. But here, it felt different. More aggressive. More unpredictable. More dangerous. Because at this level of speed, small changes aren't small anymore. They become critical. Lap after lap, drivers push through sections where lifting isn't an option. Where you commit, or you lose everything. And right in the middle of that environment, the system behaved exactly as before. Energy building. Energy shifting. And then suddenly, disappearing. A drop in speed that doesn't match what the driver is doing. No clear input. No clear signal. Just a moment where the car behaves differently, without warning. And then it happened. Qualifying. High speed. No margin. A driver fully committed, entering one of the fastest sections on the calendar. And in an instant, everything changes. The car loses speed. Not gradually. Not predictably. Instantly. And the driver behind has no time to react. No visual cue. No expectation. Just a closing gap that shouldn't exist. And in Formula One, that's all it takes. Impact. Barriers. A car destroyed at one of the most unforgiving tracks in the world. And this is where the conversation shifts completely. Because up until this moment, it was still a debate. Performance. Philosophy. Different opinions. But after Suzuka, it became reality. Because now there was proof. Not data. Not theory. A real incident, linked to the behavior everyone had been questioning. And inside the paddock, everything changed instantly. Drivers didn't need more analysis. They already understood the risk. If it happened here, it could happen anywhere. And maybe next time, it wouldn't end the same way. But here's where it gets even more intense. Because the crash wasn't the only thing pushing the situation over the edge. Behind the scenes, pressure was building from somewhere even more powerful. A place the FIA could not ignore. Because when the most influential driver on the grid starts questioning whether this is worth continuing, that's not just concern. That's a turning point. And what happened next? Forced Formula One to move faster than it ever has before. Up until this point, the situation was already serious. But after Suzuka, it became impossible to ignore. Because drivers stopped adapting. They started pushing back. Quiet concerns turned into direct criticism. Private conversations became public warnings. And inside the paddock, the tone changed completely. This was no longer about performance. It was about trust. Trust in the car. Trust in the system. Trust that when you go flat out, the car won't betray you. And right in the middle of that tension, one voice changed everything. Max Verstappen. Not just a champion. The reference point of the entire grid. The driver teams build around. The one everyone watches. And when he speaks, it carries weight. But this time, it wasn't just frustration. It was something deeper. He wasn't asking for improvements. He wasn't suggesting tweaks. He was questioning the direction of the sport itself. And then came the moment that forced everyone to react. The possibility of stepping away. Not as a threat, not as drama, but as a real consideration. If this continues, I'm not staying. That's what it meant. And that changes everything. Because losing a driver like that isn't just a competitive loss. It's a commercial shock, a credibility problem, a signal that something is fundamentally wrong. And suddenly, the pressure on the FIA explodes. Because now this isn't just a technical issue. It's a crisis. A moment where doing nothing is no longer an option. But here's where it gets complicated. Not everyone wanted change. Because hidden inside the system, there were winners. Teams that had already figured it out. Better energy management. Better efficiency. Better performance. And for them, the system wasn't broken. It was an advantage. So now the paddock splits. One side pushing for immediate action. Safety. Predictability. Control. The other side, resisting. Protecting performance. Protecting gains. Protecting position. And right in the middle, the FIA. Facing an impossible decision. Change the rules and disrupt the competitive order. Or keep the rules and risk another incident. And what makes this even more intense is the timing. Because there's no break, no pause, no time to reset. The next race is coming fast. Miami. A track built on long straights. Heavy braking zones. Close walls. High consequences. And if the same issue appears there, the risk multiplies. So the question becomes unavoidable. Do you wait and hope nothing happens? Or do you act immediately? And this time, Formula One did something it almost never does. It moved fast. Really fast. Meetings were called within days. FIA, Liberty Media, all 10 teams, engine manufacturers, drivers, everyone in the same room. Because for the first time in years, they all agreed on one thing. Something had to change. Now. Not later. Not next season. Before Miami. And what came out of those meetings was something we've never seen at this speed. A complete package of changes. 6 major modifications. Approved. Agreed. And rushed into the next race weekend. The biggest mid-season correction in modern Formula One history. But here's the detail that matters most. These changes weren't just about fixing what went wrong. They were about preventing what could happen next. Because what Suzuka revealed wasn't the worst-case scenario. It was the warning. And Miami is where Formula One finds out if that warning was enough.